I smiled at Thanksgiving and said I could not wait for our vacation. My mom did not even look up. She just laughed and told me vacation was for family, without me. A week later, my phone lit up with a pending cash advance of $7,940. The request location was 5 minutes from my parents' house. That was when I whispered, "Okay, you want without me? You are about to get it. With interest. My name is Piper Davis. I am 33 years old, and I live in Seattle, where the rain acts as a natural barrier between my apartment and the rest of the world. I work as a senior project manager at Copperline Creative Systems, a firm that specializes in crisis management for corporate branding. My job description essentially boils down to two things. One is managing impossible deadlines that would make a lesser person crumble. The second is keeping a face so devoid of emotion that clients cannot tell if I'm listening to their complaints or mentally redecorating my living room. We call it the Copperline face. It is a mask of professional, impenetrable calm. I wear it 40 hours a week. I just never thought I would have to wear it at my parents' dining table in Plano, Texas. I had flown in for Thanksgiving with a specific kind of foolish hope tucked into my carry-on luggage. Every year, around late October, I would tell myself that this year would be different. I would convince myself that the distance between Seattle and Texas had softened the edges of our family dynamic. I told myself that my father, Gordon, would ask about my career with genuine interest. I imagined that my mother, Marianne, would refrain from commenting on my weight or my marital status. I hoped my brother, Derek, and my sister, Paige, would treat me like a sibling rather than a distant cousin they were forced to tolerate. The house in Plano looked exactly the way a family home is supposed to look in a holiday commercial. The driveway was swept clean. The wreath on the door was made of authentic dried autumnal leaves. Inside, the air smelled of sage, roasted turkey, and the expensive vanilla candles my mother burned to mask the scent of old resentments. We sat down to dinner at 6 o'clock in the evening. The lighting was perfect. My mother had dimmed the overhead chandelier to a warm, golden glow. The television in the living room was on, tuned to a football game, providing a low, thrumming background noise of cheers and whistles. On the surface, we were the picture of the American dream. We had the china out, we had the crystal wine glasses, we had a turkey that looked like it had been painted with lacquer, but the warmth was fake. It was the kind of warmth that comes from a space heater, intense and localized, but leaving the corners of the room freezing cold. I sat between Derek and the wall. Derek was 35, 2 years older than me, and currently in between what he called ventures. He spent the first 20 minutes of the meal talking about a cryptocurrency scheme he was sure would pay off by the first quarter of next year. You just do not understand the volatility. "Piper," he said, reaching across me for the mashed potatoes without asking, "you are too corporate. You like the steady paycheck. Real wealth takes risk." I slowly cut a piece of turkey. I did not mention that my steady paycheck had covered his car insurance for the last 6 months. I just nodded. Across the table, Paige was scrolling through her phone while feeding her toddler pieces of a roll. Paige was 31, the baby of the family, and she wore her exhaustion like a badge of honor. She looked up only to complain about her husband, who was notably absent, claiming he had a migraine. "He is useless," Paige said, taking a sip of wine. I asked him to book the flight for the trip, and he forgot. Now the prices have gone up 20%. My mother, Marianne, sighed from the head of the table. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored sweater that I knew cost $300 because I had sent her the gift card for her birthday. "Well, we will figure it out," Mom said, beaming a smile at everyone but me. "The important thing is that we are all going to be together. We need this break." I felt a small spark of warmth in my chest. This was my opening. For the last 3 months, the family group chat had been buzzing about a week-long vacation to a resort in Florida. I had been the one to suggest the location. I had been the one to research the best dates to get the group rate. I had even fronted the deposit for the rental van because Derek did not have his card on him at the time. I put down my fork and smiled. It was a genuine smile, not the Copperline face. "I cannot wait for our vacation." I said, "I really need the sun. Seattle has been gray for 3 weeks straight." The table went quiet. It was not the comfortable silence of people enjoying a meal. It was the sharp, sudden silence of a record scratching. Derek stopped chewing. Paige looked up from her phone. My father, who had been focused entirely on his green beans, slowly lowered his fork. My mother looked at me. She did not smile. She did not frown. She looked at me with an expression of mild amusement, as if I had just told a joke that she found quaint but slightly stupid. She picked up her wine glass, swirled the red liquid around, and then let out a short, dry laugh. "Oh, honey," she said. She looked around the table, making eye contact with Derek, then Paige, then Dad. "Vacation is for family," she said. She paused for a beat, just long enough for the words to hang in the air like smoke. "Without you." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. My brain tried to auto-correct the sentence. Maybe she meant without you having to work. Maybe she meant without you stressing. But then the laughter started. It began with Derek. He let out a loud, barking guffaw, slamming his hand on the table. "Good one, Mom," he said. Then Paige started giggling, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. Even my father, the man who usually avoided conflict by staring at his plate, chuckled. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and shook his head, smiling. They were all laughing. They were laughing at me. They were laughing at my excitement. They were laughing at the idea that I thought I was included. My mother was still looking at me, that smirk fixed on her face. It was not a look of apology. It was a look of triumph. She enjoyed the punchline. I was the punchline. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands, resting on the white tablecloth, went numb. In the boardroom at Copperline, when a client screams that we have ruined their brand, I do not flinch. I breathe in, I breathe out, and I execute the protocol. But this was not a boardroom. This was the dining room where I had grown up. These were the people who were supposed to be my safety net. I looked at the food on my plate. The turkey suddenly looked dry and unappetizing. The cranberry sauce looked like congealed red plastic. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not throw my wine in Derek's face, even though he was still snickering and muttering, "Without you," under his breath. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound was loud enough to cut through their laughter. But only for a second. "Where are you going?" my father asked, his voice devoid of concern. "We have not had pie yet. I am not feeling well." I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when I told a CEO that their project was going to be delayed by 2 weeks. Calm, final, non-negotiable. "I think I'm going to head out." "Oh, stop being so dramatic. Piper," my mother said, waving her hand dismissively. "It was just a joke. You are always so sensitive." "Sit down." I did not sit down. I grabbed my purse from the back of the chair. I walked out of the dining room. Through the hallway that was lined with family photos, I noticed, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that I was not in any of the recent ones. There were photos of Paige's wedding, photos of Derek graduating from a course he never used, photos of Mom and Dad on a cruise. I was a ghost in this house. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool November night. Behind me, I could still hear them. The laughter had picked up again. They were not talking about me leaving. They were just moving on to the next topic. The interruption of my departure already forgotten. I walked to my rental car parked in the driveway. It was a silver sedan, nondescript and functional. I got in and closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the most satisfying thing I had heard all day. It sealed me in. It sealed them out. I sat there in the dark. I did not start the engine immediately. I stared at the garage door of my parents' house. I thought about the flight I had paid for to get here. $640. I thought about the rental car. $300. I thought about the groceries I had bought yesterday because Mom said she was short on cash until her pension check cleared. $215. I thought about the vacation. Vacation is for family. Without you. The words replayed in my head, looping over and over. It was not just an insult. It was a statement of fact. To them. I was not family. Family was the people who got to go to the resort. Family was the people who got to laugh. So what was I? I looked down at my hands, gripping the steering wheel. I was the resource. I was the safety net. I was the bank. I remembered the authorized user credit card. It was a card I had opened when I was 22. freshly graduated, and building my credit score. My mother had suggested I add her as an authorized user, just in case of emergencies. She said it would help her run errands for me if I was ever stuck at work. Over the last decade, the charges had been sporadic: a grocery run here, a gas station fill up there, small things I ignored because, well, she was my mother. But tonight, the math changed. They did not want me in Florida. They made that clear. They laughed about it, but they had certainly been happy to let me pay the deposit. I realized then that they did not want to cut me out completely. They wanted to cut me out of the joy, out of the memories, out of the respect. They wanted to revoke my rights as a human being, as a daughter, as a sister. But they wanted to keep my rights as a wallet. They wanted the vacation. They just did not want the donor to be present to spoil the mood. I reached for the ignition and turned the key. The engine purred to life. The dashboard lit up, casting a pale blue glow on my face. I looked at the house one last time. Through the sheer curtains of the dining room window, I could see the silhouette of my mother. She was raising her glass in a toast. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a bridge collapsing in the distance. I put the car in reverse. I am done. I whispered to the empty car. I did not cry. Tears were for people who expected better. I knew better now. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It felt like the air conditioning in my office building sterile, efficient, and chilling. No one gets to laugh at my self-worth and then pick my pocket. I said. I backed out of the driveway, shifted into drive, and headed toward the airport. I did not look back. I had a flight to catch. And when I landed in Seattle, I had a lot of work to do, not for Copperline Creative Systems, for Piper Davis, because if vacation was without me, then everything else was about to be without me too. And unlike them, I knew exactly what that cost. The flight back to Seattle was 4 hours and 50 minutes of white noise and dark windows. I did not buy a drink. I did not watch a movie. I just sat there, staring at the seat back in front of me, feeling a sensation that was entirely new. It was not the sharp sting of rejection I had felt in the driveway. It was something heavier, colder, and significantly more permanent. It felt like the numbness you get after a dentist injects Novocaine, but it was spread over my entire life. When I unlocked the door to my apartment in downtown Seattle, the silence that greeted me was different from the silence in Plano. In Texas, the silence was heavy with things unsaid. Here, the silence was clean. It was mine. My apartment was a monochromatic sanctuary of grays and blues, a direct reflection of the weather outside. It was efficient. It was organized. It was paid for solely by me. I dropped my suitcase in the hallway and did not unpack. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window looking out at the rain slicking the city streets. I waited for the tears to come. I really thought they would. I thought I would collapse onto my expensive West Elm rug and sob about how my mother did not love me and how my father was a coward. But the tears did not come. Instead, a dry, hollow clarity settled in my chest. It was the feeling of a contract finally expiring. I checked my phone. There were 3 missed calls from my mother. There were 2 voicemails. I pressed play on the first one. Hi, Piper. It is Mom. Just wanted to make sure you got to the airport okay. You left in such a rush. Give me a call when you land. Love you. Her voice was light, airy, completely devoid of tension. It was the voice she used when she was talking to the neighbors about her garden. I pressed play on the second one. Piper, honey, call me back. I found that recipe for the pecan pie you like. I wanted to send it to you. Also, Derek was asking if you sent that Venmo for the group gift for Aunt Linda yet. Let me know. Bye. I lowered the phone. There it was. The absolute erasure of reality. She had told me to my face that I was excluded from the family, laughed about it, and now she was calling about pecan pie and money for Aunt Linda. She was not apologizing because she did not think she had done anything wrong. In her mind, the dynamic was set in stone. I was the dramatic one. She was the matriarch, and the status quo required me to pay for things. I sat down at my dining table and opened my laptop. I did not open my work email. For the first time in 5 years, Copperline Creative Systems was not the priority. I was the priority. I started scrolling through my mental ledger. It was a painful exercise. I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about the time Derek needed first and last month's rent for his apartment because his commission check was late. $1,800. He promised to pay me back in 2 weeks. That was 3 years ago. I thought about the time Paige needed a deposit for her wedding venue. She had called me crying, saying her credit card was maxed out and she would lose the date. $3,000. I wired it the same day. When I asked about it a year later, she looked at me with wide, hurt eyes and said, "Surely you do not expect me to pay you back for my wedding gift?" Piper. It had started so small. A plane ticket here, a grocery bill there. I will pay you back next week. I forgot my wallet. Can you get this? It had slowly calcified into an obligation. I was the safety net that they did not even bother to thank anymore. They just assumed I would catch them. I logged into my primary banking portal. The screen populated with numbers, graphs, and lists. I was good with money. I had to be. I had been subsidizing 4 adults on a single salary for a decade. I clicked on the tab for my credit cards. My eyes scanned the list until they landed on one specific account, the Onyx Rewards Visa. I had opened this card when I was 22 years old. I was fresh out of college, working my first junior associate job, and terrified of the financial world. My mother had gone to the bank branch with me. She had been so helpful, so knowledgeable. She had guided me through the application process, and right at the end, she had suggested, casually, that I add her as an authorized user. "It is just for emergencies." "Piper," she had said, patting my hand, "if you are ever in the hospital, or stuck overseas, or if you lose your card, I can access the account to help you. It is what families do." I had nodded, grateful for the support. I signed the paper. A week later, 2 cards arrived in the mail, one with my name, one with Marianne Davis embossed on the front. I stared at the screen now. Authorized users. For 11 years. That card had been in her wallet. To be fair, she rarely used it. In the beginning, there were a few charges for gas or pharmacy items, always followed by a check in the mail from my father. But over the last 2 years, the checks had stopped coming, and the charges had become more frequent. Target runs, liquor store purchases, a dinner at a steakhouse in Plano that cost $200. I had paid the bills without saying a word. I had told myself it was fine. They were my parents. They had raised me. $200 for a dinner was a small price to pay for keeping the peace. But peace was not what I had received in return. I had received a seat at a table where I was the punchline. My finger hovered over the Remove Authorized User button. My instinct was to click it, to sever the tie immediately, to burn the bridge and watch the flames reflecting in the Seattle rain. But then I stopped. If I removed her now, she would get a notification. Or worse, she would try to use the card for a pack of gum and get declined. She would call me immediately, screaming about embarrassment and errors. She would demand to know why I was being so petty. It would trigger a confrontation before I was ready. I did not want a confrontation. I wanted control. I withdrew my hand from the mouse and took a deep breath. I needed to be smart. I needed to be Copperline Creative Systems smart. When we managed a crisis at work, we did not panic. We secured the perimeter. We gathered data. We laid traps. I clicked on the Settings tab instead. First, I went to the Notifications section. I customized the alerts. Usually, banks only alert you for suspicious activity or transactions over a certain amount. I changed the settings. Alert me for any transaction over $1. Alert me for any card not present transaction. Alert me for any international transaction. Alert me for any cash advance request. I saved the changes. Now, if she bought a candy bar, I would know. Next, I went to the security section. I looked at the password recovery options. The security questions were laughably simple. What is your mother's maiden name? What was the name of your first pet? What street did you grow up on? My family knew all of these answers. Of course they did. They were the answers. If my mother ever wanted to lock me out of my own account, she could do it in 30 seconds. She could reset my password, change the email address, and take full control of the credit line. I clicked Edit. I changed the questions to things they could never guess. What is your favorite obscure philosophy book? What is the name of the coffee shop you visited in London in 2015? What is the model number of your first laptop? I typed in answers that were random strings of alphanumeric characters, recording them in my physical notebook that never left my purse. Then, I enabled two-factor authentication. I set it to an authenticator app, not SMS. If they tried to log in, they would need my physical phone and my Face ID to get the code. I was locking the castle gates, but I was leaving the drawbridge down just enough to see who would try to cross it. Finally, I looked at the autopay settings. I had my car insurance, my phone bill, and my subscription services tied to this card to earn the points. If things went south, and I had to freeze the card instantly, my life would be disrupted. I opened a new tab and logged into my checking account. One by one, I moved every single essential bill to my debit card. It took 45 minutes. By the time I was done, the Onyx Rewards Visa was an island. It was connected to nothing vital to my survival. It was just a line of credit sitting in a database, waiting. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. The apartment was dark now, save for the city lights bleeding through the windows. My phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up. It was a notification from the family group chat, simply titled, The Davises. I opened the thread. Paige had sent a photo. It was a screenshot of a resort website. Palm trees, white sand, and a sparkling blue pool. Caption, look at this swim-up bar. I'm going to live here next week, Derek replied with 3 beer mug emojis and a sunglasses face. Mom replied, you deserve it, sweetie. It is going to be such a wonderful time for us to reconnect, Dad replied. Just make sure we confirm the airport transfer. I do not want to drive the rental van if I do not have to. I scrolled up. There was my message from 3 weeks ago, confirming that I had paid the deposit for that rental van. There was my link to the flight deals I had found for everyone. And then, there was the gap. The gap between my departure from the dinner table and this current conversation about swim-up bars. No one had asked, Piper, are you okay? No one had said, Piper, we are sorry about what Mom said. No one had even asked, Piper, are you still coming? They knew I was not coming. That was the point. The joke at dinner was not a joke. It was a policy update. I was out. But the logistics I had arranged, and the deposit I had paid, were very much in. I looked at the emojis, the excitement, the absolute lack of guilt. They were planning a vacation on the foundation of my money and my exclusion, and they were sleeping soundly at night. A strange thing happened then. The heavy, cold feeling in my chest shifted. It did not get warmer. It got harder. It crystallized. I was not angry. Anger is hot. Anger makes you scream and throw things and send long emotional text messages that you regret in the morning. I was past anger. I was awake. For 33 years, I had been sleepwalking through my relationship with my family, dreaming that if I just paid enough, did enough, and achieved enough, they would finally see me. I thought the transaction was love for loyalty. I was wrong. The transaction was access for money. I set the phone down on the table. Face up. I watched the screen go black. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower. I needed to wash the airplane air and the Texas dust off my skin. As the hot water hit my back, I made a silent vow. I would not block them. I would not leave the group chat. I would not close the credit card. I would watch. I would wait. I knew my family. I knew their habits. I knew that my mother considered limits to be suggestions and budgets to be flexible concepts for other people. I knew that Derek felt entitled to anything he could touch. They thought the vacation was without me. They were right, but not in the way they thought. The vacation was going to be without my subsidy, but they did not know that yet. I turned off the water and stepped out onto the bath mat. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked tired, but clear. The copper-lined face was back, but this time, it was protecting the only client that mattered. I dried my hair, put on fresh pajamas, and went to bed, for the first time in years. I did not check my email before sleeping. I simply lay in the dark, listening to the rain, waiting for the inevitable notification that I knew was coming. It was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when, and when it arrived, I would be ready. It was exactly 1 week after Thanksgiving. A Thursday afternoon that was as gray and drizzling as every other Thursday afternoon in Seattle. I was sitting at my desk at Copperline Creative Systems, surrounded by the low hum of high-performance computers and the frantic typing of junior associates. We were in the middle of a launch for a tech startup that wanted to disrupt the pet food industry, and the deadline was tight. My screens were filled with Gantt charts, budget spreadsheets, and Slack notifications. I was in the zone. My pulse was steady. My coffee was cold. I was effectively a machine processing data. Then, my personal phone vibrated against the hardwood of my desk. It was not the standard buzz of a text message. It was the long, sustained vibration that I had programmed specifically for the high-priority alerts I had set up the night I returned from Texas. I picked up the phone. The screen was bright against the dim office lighting. The notification was from the Onyx Rewards app. Pending cash advance. I stared at the numbers. $7,940. I blinked. I read it again. $7,940. My brain, usually so good at finding patterns, momentarily stalled. That was not a grocery run. That was not a flight booking. That was a used car. That was a down payment. That was a significant percentage of my available credit limit. I tapped the notification to expand the details. Location Plano Branch, Coit Road. The air in my lungs seemed to vanish. I knew that branch. It was 5 minutes from my parents' house. It was the branch next to the grocery store where my mother bought her vanilla candles. It was the branch where I had opened my first savings account when I was 16. The precision of the location eliminated any possibility of fraud by a stranger. A hacker in Russia does not target a physical bank branch in Plano, Texas, to withdraw cash from a card owned by a woman in Seattle. This was not a mistake. This was a withdrawal. I stood up. My chair rolled back with a soft whir. I am stepping out for 10 minutes. I told the junior designer sitting across from me, handle the client if they ping. I did not wait for an answer. I walked out of the open plan office, past the break room, and into one of the soundproof phone booths we used for sensitive client calls. I closed the glass door and locked it. The silence inside was immediate and heavy. I dialed the number on the back of my digital card in the app. The automated voice greeted me. It asked for the last 4 digits of my social security number. I punched them in. It asked for my mother's maiden name. I paused. My fingers hovered over the keypad. I had changed this security question last week. I typed in the first 4 letters of the obscure philosophy book I had selected as the new answer. Access granted. I bypassed the menu options and pressed 0, then 0 again. I needed a human. A smooth professional voice came on the line. Thank you for calling Onyx Rewards. My name is Marcus. How can I assist you today? Ms. Davis. I took a breath. I summoned the Copperline face, channeling it entirely into my voice. I needed to sound rational. I needed to sound like the owner of the account, not a panicked daughter. Hi, Marcus, I said. I am looking at a notification for a pending cash advance of $7,940. I need to verify the details of this transaction immediately. There was a tapping sound of a keyboard on the other end. One moment. Let me pull that up, Marcus said. Yes, I see it here. A counter cash advance request initiated at the Plano, Texas branch at 2:14 p. Central Time. Initiated. I repeated. Has it cleared? It is currently in pending status, Marcus said. For an amount this large, especially a cash advance, our system requires a secondary authorization or a manager override at the branch level. It triggered a fraud alert because you are currently listed as residing in Washington State. Okay, I said. My voice was clipped. Can you tell me who initiated the request? Was it a card-present transaction? Yes, it was a card-present transaction, Marcus confirmed. The notes from the teller indicate that the customer presented the card and valid identification. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, starting at my sternum and radiating out to my fingertips. Valid identification, I asked. The card is in my name. I am in Seattle. The card presented was the authorized user card. Marcus said. The identification provided matched the name on that card. Marianne Davis. I stopped breathing for exactly 2 seconds. It was not a guess. It was not a hypothesis. My mother had walked into the bank on a Thursday afternoon, stood in line, walked up to a teller, and handed them the credit card I paid for. She had presented her driver's license. She had looked a human being in the eye and asked for nearly $8,000 of my money. She was not sneaking around. She was not trying to hide it. She was doing it in broad daylight because she believed she had the right. She believed that the plastic in her wallet was an extension of her own bank account. She believed that my financial stability was community property. Vacation is for family, without you. The words echoed in the small glass booth. They did not want me there, but they were perfectly happy to take the money I would have spent, and then some. They were draining me. They were liquidating my credit line to fund the trip they had excluded me from, or maybe they were just taking it because they could, because they felt I owed them. Ms. Davis Marcus asked, "Are you still there?" "I am here," I said. The coldness in my chest turned into ice, hard, sharp, and functional. I did not authorize this transaction. I said, "Okay," Marcus said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "If this was not authorized by you, we can mark it as potential fraud. However, since the user is an authorized user on the account, it gets a little complicated. Technically, she has permission to use the credit line. I am revoking that permission." I said, "Right now." I closed my eyes and visualized the dashboard of my life. I was cutting the power lines. "Marcus, I want to take the following steps, and I want them done in this specific order." I waited for him to acknowledge me. "Go ahead," he said. "First," I said, "I want to remove Marianne Davis as an authorized user immediately. I want her card deactivated. I want it to be a piece of useless plastic before she walks out of that bank." "Done," Marcus said. "I have removed her from the account. The card number associated with her name is now void." "Second," I continued, "I want you to decline the pending cash advance. Do not let that money leave the bank. I can place a stop on it." Marcus said, "Since the system flagged it for review, I can reject the override. It will show as declined on the teller's screen." "Do it," I said. "It is done," he replied. "The transaction has been declined." Third, I said, "I want to report that my trust in the security of this account has been compromised. I want you to close my current card number as well. I want a new account number issued. I want this current account completely inaccessible to anyone who might have the old numbers written down or saved in a browser. That will require us to send you a new card." "Ms. Davis," Marcus warned, "you will be without a physical card for about 2 days. That is fine." I said, "I will pay for expedited shipping. Send it to my Seattle address." And Marcus, "Yes, add a note to the file." I said, "I want it on the permanent record of this dispute." The note should read, "The primary account holder did not authorize this cash advance. The authorized user attempted to liquidate credit limit without consent. If there are any future attempts, they are to be treated as fraudulent." Can you read that back to me? Marcus paused. I could hear him typing. "The primary account holder did not authorize this cash advance. The authorized user attempted to liquidate credit limit without consent. Future attempts are to be treated as fraudulent. Is that correct?" "That is correct." I said. "Is there anything else?" Marcus asked. "Reset my online access passwords one more time," I said, "just to be safe." We went through the security protocol. I verified my identity again. I set a new password that was 20 characters long and included symbols that were annoying to type on a phone keyboard. When we were finished, Marcus's voice softened slightly. "I am sorry you are dealing with this. Ms. Davis, it is never easy when it involves family members." I looked at my reflection in the glass of the phone booth. My face was pale, but my eyes were dry. "It is just business." "Marcus," I said, "thank you for your help." I hung up the phone. I stayed in the booth for a moment, staring at the screen of my phone. I opened the banking app again. I refreshed the page. The spinning wheel turned for an agonizingly long second. Then, the data populated. The line item for the cash advance was still there, but the status had changed. The yellow text that had said pending was gone. In its place was red text, declined. I felt a rush of adrenaline so potent it made my hands shake. I had done it. I had stopped the bleeding. For the first time in my life, I had not just rolled over. I had not just written the check to make the problem go away. I had slammed the vault door shut. My mother was standing in a bank in Plano right now. I could picture the scene. The teller would be looking at her screen, confused. She would tell my mother there was a problem. My mother would smile, that tight, condescending smile, and tell the girl to check again. She would say there must be a mistake. She would say her daughter had plenty of credit, and then the teller would have to tell her, it has been declined. The card is no longer valid. The humiliation would be absolute, public, undeniable. I looked at the time. It was 2:25 p.m., Central Time. The transaction had been declined less than a minute ago. I knew what was coming next. I set my phone down on the small shelf in the phone booth and watched it. 3, 2, 1. The screen lit up. Incoming call, Mom. I watched it ring. The vibration buzzed against the shelf. An angry, persistent sound. I did not answer. The ringing stopped. 5 seconds later, incoming call, Dad. I watched that one ring too. Then a text message appeared at the top of the screen from Derek. Text. Piper. Pick up the phone right now. Mom is at the bank and there is a huge issue. Then another text from Paige. Text. What did you do? The phone started ringing again. Mom. It was like watching a breaking news story unfold in real time. The panic was radiating from Texas, bouncing off satellites, and landing in my quiet glass booth in Seattle. They were scrambling. The free ride had just hit a wall, and they were stunned. I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was like I was watching a group of people trying to open a door that I had welded shut. They could pound on it all they wanted. They could scream. They could blame the door. But it was not going to open. I reached out and silenced the ringer. I did not block them. Not yet. I wanted the record. I wanted the timestamps. I wanted the evidence of their desperation. I picked up the phone and unlocked the door of the booth. I walked back out into the office. The hum of the computers was the same. The rain was still falling against the windows. The junior designer was still typing furiously. Everything was exactly the same as it had been 10 minutes ago. Except for one thing. I was $7,940 richer than my family wanted me to be. I sat down at my desk, woke up my computer monitors, and looked at the Gantt chart for the pet food launch. Hey? Piper, the junior designer, asked. Looking up, client wants to know if we can push the review to 4 o'clock. I looked at him. I smiled. It was a real smile this time. Tell them 4 o'clock is perfect, I said. I am wide awake. My phone on the desk lit up again. Incoming call. Mom, 4 missed calls. I turned the phone face down. Let them call. Let them rage. The bank was closed. And so was I. The phone was not just ringing. It was vibrating with such intensity that it was slowly inching its way across the smooth surface of my desk. It looked like a frantic, possessed object trying to escape its own hardware. I watched it move for a moment, listening to the buzzing sound amplifying against the wood. It was the sound of panic. It was the sound of a plan disintegrating in real time. I picked it up, not to answer, but to silence the noise so my coworkers would not stare. The screen was a chaotic waterfall of notifications. They were stacking on top of each other so fast that I could barely read the names before they were pushed down by the next one. Missed call, Mom. Missed call, Dad. Missed call, Derek. Missed call, Paige. Text message, Dad. Text message. Derek, missed call, Mom. It was a coordinated assault. It was the kind of communication barrage you usually only see when someone has died or a house is on fire. But no one had died. The only thing that had expired was my credit limit. I unlocked the phone and went straight to the family group chat. The Davises. I needed to understand the timeline. I needed to see the crime scene before the bodies started falling. I scrolled up, past the angry red badges of unread messages, back to about 20 minutes ago, back to when I was on the phone with Marcus at the bank. The chat log told a fascinating story of hubris. At 2:10 in the afternoon, Paige had written, "We are at the front desk. The guy says if we pay in cash right now, he can upgrade the suite to the ocean view for the same price as the garden view. We need to move fast." At 2:12 in the afternoon, Derek had replied, "Do it. Ocean view is non-negotiable." At 2:13 in the afternoon, my mother, Marianne, had sent a message that made my blood run cold. It was a single line, "I'm handling it right now." She had added a smiley face emoji, a blushing, happy smiley face. She was standing in the bank line at that exact moment, holding my card, preparing to drain nearly $8,000 from my account, and she was typing emojis. She was not nervous. She was not conflicted. She was efficiently managing the logistics of stealing from her daughter to upgrade her view of the Atlantic Ocean. Then, there was a gap of about 10 minutes. This was the time I spent on the phone with Marcus. This was the time the teller was likely looking at the screen, frowning, and calling a supervisor. This was the time my mother's smile was slowly sliding off her face. Then came the explosion. At 2:25 in the afternoon, right after I hung up with the bank, the tone of the chat shifted from logistical to hysterical. Mom wrote, "The card is not working. It says declined. Piper, did you change something?" 2 minutes later, she wrote again, "Call the bank. Now. The teller says the card is void." This is embarrassing. People are staring. Then Dad entered the chat. His messages were short, capitalized, and commanded like I was a wayward employee. "Pick up. Now. We are waiting." Then Derek, "Piper, what is going on? We are losing the reservation. The guy cannot hold the suite forever." Then Paige, "This is a joke, right? Please tell me this is a joke." I read these messages with a level of detachment that surprised me. I felt like a forensic accountant reviewing the ledger of a failed company. They were not asking if I was okay. They were not worried that my identity had been stolen. They were worried about the suite. They were worried about the embarrassment of being told no. My phone started ringing again in my hand. It was my father. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then a text from Derek appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Do you know what you just ruined? You are being so petty. Fix this." There was no apology. There was no explanation. There was just the assumption that I had broken something that belonged to them. They truly believed they were entitled to that money. They believed that my role in the ecosystem was to remain silent and solvent. I sat there, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. I could type a paragraph. I could explain that I knew about the cash advance. I could scream at them for the audacity of going to my branch. I could ask them why they thought they could take a vacation without me but take my money with them. But words were useless with people who did not speak the language of accountability. They would twist my words. They would gaslight me. They would say I was overreacting. So I decided to speak their language, the language of transaction. I took a screenshot of the banking app. I made sure to capture the specific line item clearly, the date today, the location Plano, Texas, the amount $7,940, the status declined. I cropped the image so there was no extraneous information, just the cold, hard facts of the rejection. I opened the group chat. The typing bubbles were dancing at the bottom of the screen. Someone, probably Paige, was writing another long, guilt-tripping message. I uploaded the image. I watched the blue progress bar slide across the top of the screen. Sent. Then, I typed 2 sentences. I did not use capital letters. I did not use exclamation points. I wanted the words to look as flat and final as a tombstone. Vacation without me. Payment without me. I hit send. I stared at the screen. The typing bubbles vanished instantly. For a solid 10 seconds, nothing happened. The chat was dead silent. I could imagine the scene in Texas. I could see them standing in the lobby of the bank, or maybe they had retreated to the parking lot by now. I could see them huddled around my mother's phone, staring at the image, reading the words. They were processing the shift in power. They were realizing that the ATM had not just malfunctioned. The ATM had gained sentience and shut itself down. Then, the reaction came. It was not shame. It was rage. The messages flooded in so fast the screen blurred. Mom. How dare you? After everything we have done for you. Paige. You are so selfish. You knew how much we wanted this. You did this on purpose to humiliate Mom. Derek. You are unbelievable. You have plenty of money. You are just doing this to be a bitch. Dad. You are cutting off your nose to spite your face. Piper. This is family. Family helps family. You fix this immediately or do not bother coming home for Christmas. I read the words, selfish, bitch, humiliate, a week ago. These words would have crushed me. I would have been crying in the bathroom, wondering what was wrong with me. I would have called the bank back and authorized the charge just to make them stop screaming. I would have bought their love, even though the price was too high. But today, the words just bounced off. They were not describing me. They were describing their own panic. They were projecting their own greed onto my boundaries. They called me selfish for keeping my own earnings. They called me dramatic for refusing to be robbed. I did not reply. I had said my piece. Vacation without me. Payment without me. It was a complete sentence. It was a complete philosophy. My phone rang again. It was Derek this time. I looked at his name on the screen. Derek, who owed me almost $2,000 for rent. Derek, who had laughed the loudest at the dinner table. I did not just decline the call. I tapped the small eye icon next to his name. I scrolled down to the bottom of the contact card. Block caller. The phone asked me to confirm. I tapped yes. The ringing stopped. Then Paige called. Paige, who wanted the ocean view. Block caller. Confirm. Then Mom. Marianne Davis, the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes and then use those lessons to walk all over me. Block caller. Confirm. Then Dad, the man who ordered me to pick up the phone like I was a subordinate. Block caller. Confirm. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. It was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a hurricane eye. I knew the storm was raging around me. I knew they were probably screaming into their phones right now, leaving voicemails that I would never hear, sending texts that would bounce back as undeliverable. But on my end, peace. I took a deep breath. My heart rate was slowing down. I was not doing this to win. You cannot win against people who change the rules every time they are losing. I was doing this to survive. I was doing this to stop the noise so I could think. I knew this was not the end. I knew my family. They were not the type to accept a defeat and move on. They operated on a strategy of attrition. They would try to find another way in. They would try to find a vulnerability. I needed to be prepared. I opened a new folder on my phone. I named it Documentation. I went back into the chat history. I took screenshots of everything. I screenshotted Paige's text about the payment. I screenshotted Mom's "I am handling it" message with the smiley face. I screenshotted the timestamps. I screenshotted the insults. I screenshotted Dad's ultimatum about Christmas. Then I went to my call log. I screenshotted the list of missed calls. The sheer volume of them. 17 calls in 12 minutes? It looked like harassment. Because it was harassment, I saved everything to the folder. Then I uploaded the folder to my cloud drive, and then I backed it up to a hard drive connected to my laptop. I felt a dark intuition stirring in my gut. This was going to get messy. They were desperate. They had likely already committed to expenses based on the assumption of my money. If they couldn't get the cash from me, they would look for someone to blame. They would rewrite the narrative. I needed to make sure my version of the truth was bulletproof. I looked at the time. It was now 2:45 in the afternoon. 30 minutes. That was all it took to sever a lifetime of financial dependency. I put the phone down on the desk. Face up this time. It was quiet. It was just a piece of glass and metal. It no longer held the power to hurt me. I turned back to my computer. The pet food launch was still waiting. The deadlines were still real. I picked up my mouse and clicked on a spreadsheet. I felt lighter. It was a strange sensation, like taking off a heavy backpack that you had forgotten you were wearing. I whispered to the empty office, "Try me." I was ready for the next round. I almost welcomed it, because for the first time, I wasn't playing their game. I was playing mine. And in my game, the bank was always closed. The silence in my apartment did not last long. It was a fragile, artificial peace that I knew was destined to shatter. I spent Friday working from home, my laptop set up on the kitchen island, my eyes darting to the front door every time the elevator chimed in the hallway. I had blocked their numbers. But technology is a hydra. You cut off one head, and another snakes its way in. It came through an email notification at 11 in the morning. It was from Paige. She had bypassed the block by using her work email address, something she usually claimed was strictly for professional use. The subject line was blank. The body of the message was 2 sentences that made the hair on my arms stand up. "We are coming to talk in person. You cannot ignore us forever." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. They had just been denied a fraudulent cash advance of nearly $8,000. They were likely scrambling to cover the deposit they had lost. Logic dictated that they should be saving every penny. Logic dictated that they should be panicking about their own finances. But my family did not operate on logic. They operated on the principle of overwhelming force. They were spending money on last-minute flights to Seattle, flights that likely cost $2,000 or more for 4 people just to come here and force me to pay for the vacation they had already ruined. It was financial suicide, but it was also a terrifying display of commitment to their narrative. I typed a reply. I did not address them. I did not ask for flight numbers. I wrote 7 words. Do not come. I will not open the door. I hit send. Then, I closed the laptop. I knew they were coming. I knew my mother. She believed that physical proximity was her superpower. She believed that if she could just get in my face, if she could just touch my arm and do that teary-eyed look she had perfected over 3 decades, I would crumble. She thought I was a locked safe, and she was the only one with the combination. I needed to change the lock. I put on my raincoat and went to the nearest electronics store. I bought a wireless video doorbell, the kind that adheres to the door frame and connects to your Wi-Fi instantly. I did not ask for permission from my landlord. I did not care about the building aesthetics. I needed eyes on the hallway. I returned home and installed it. It took 10 minutes. The camera was small, black, and unobtrusive, but its blinking blue light sent a clear message: I am watching. Then, I went downstairs to the lobby. The concierge, a man named Mr. Henderson, who usually only saw me when I was picking up packages, looked up in surprise. Mr. Henderson, I said, keeping my voice steady, I am expecting some unwanted visitors. My family is flying in from Texas. I have not invited them. I do not want them allowed up to my floor. Mr. Henderson frowned, adjusting his glasses. Is there a safety concern? Ms. Davis, he asked. I thought about the word safety. Was I physically afraid of them? My father was 60. My mother was 5'4". Derek was loud but generally cowardly. They were not going to beat me up, but they were going to invade me. They were going to try to break into my mind, my sanctuary, and my wallet. That was a safety concern. They are aggressive, I said, and they are desperate for money. Please do not buzz them in. If they slip in behind someone else, I need you to know that they are trespassing. I will make a note of it, he said, typing into his terminal. No access for the Davis family. I went back upstairs. I locked the deadbolt. I engaged the chain lock. I checked the video feed on my phone. The hallway was empty. The gray carpet stretched out, silent and vacant. I waited. The afternoon dragged on. The rain hammered against the glass of my living room window, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and silver. I sat on my couch, my phone in my hand, watching the battery percentage tick down. 90%, 80%. At 7:14 in the evening, my phone vibrated. It was a sharp, urgent buzz that I felt in my teeth. Motion detected front door. I did not go to the peephole. I did not walk to the door. I stayed on the couch, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I unlocked my phone and tapped the notification. The screen filled with the live feed from the hallway. The fisheye lens of the camera distorted the image, curving the edges of the hallway so it looked like a tunnel. Standing there, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light of the corridor, were 4 figures. They looked like distorted caricatures of the people I had left in Texas. My father was standing closest to the door. His face was red, flushed with either anger or the exertion of travel. He was wearing his heavy raincoat, the one he usually only wore for funerals. Derek was behind him, leaning against the wall, looking hungover and furious. He was checking his phone, his thumb stabbing at the screen. Paige was standing with her arms crossed, shivering slightly in a denim jacket that was far too thin for Seattle in November. She looked annoyed, as if I had personally inconvenienced her by living in a city with weather. And then there was my mother. Marianne Davis was standing directly in front of the camera. She did not know it was there. She was using the reflection in the brass number plate on my door to fix her hair. She tucked a stray strand of gray blonde hair behind her ear. She smoothed down her eyebrows. She licked her lips to make them look moist. It was a performance. She was preparing her face. She was getting into character. I watched her take a deep breath, her chest rising and falling. Then, she reached out and knocked. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoed through my apartment. Loud and violent. It was not a polite knock. It was a demand. "Piper," she called out. Her voice was muffled by the heavy wood of the door, but I could hear the tone perfectly. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. High-pitched, trembling slightly. "Piper, honey, are you in there?" I did not move. Bang, bang, bang. "We know you are home." "Piper." My father's voice boomed. "The concierge said you were in the building. Open this door." I watched on the screen as my mother shot my father a look, a sharp, warning glare. She wanted to play the good cop. "Gordon, stop," she hissed at him. Then she turned back to the door, leaning in close. "Piper, please, we are so worried about you. You just ran off without saying goodbye. We flew all the way here to make sure you are okay. Please, just open the door so we can see you." I felt a wave of nausea, worried. They were worried. They were worried about the $7,000. They were worried about the resort booking. They were not worried about me. If they were worried about me, they would have called the police for a wellness check. They would not have brought the entire clan to stand in my hallway like a debt collection agency. I stood up and walked silently to the door. I did not touch the handle. I stood 6 inches away from the wood. I could hear their breathing on the other side. I could smell the faint scent of my mother's vanilla perfume seeping through the cracks. It was suffocating. "Open the door." "Piper," Derek said. His voice was slurred. "Do not be a child. We just want to talk. You ruined everything." Paige muttered. I could hear her clearly. "You are such a drama queen. Just come out here and fix it." I placed my hand on the deadbolt, checking to make sure it was fully engaged. The metal was cold under my palm. Mom knocked again, softer this time, a rhythmic, pleading tap. "Piper, I know you are angry about the joke at dinner," she said. "I am sorry if it hurt your feelings. But you cannot just cut off your family. We need to settle this. We need to figure out the finances for next week." There it was, the pivot. Feelings first, finances second. I pressed my forehead against the door. I closed my eyes. "Go away," I whispered. I did not say it loud enough for them to hear. It was for me. "Piper," my father shouted. He pounded the door with his fist this time, a heavy thudding blow that made the frame rattle. "Stop acting like a child. Open this goddamn door right now, on the screen." I saw Derek step forward, looking like he might kick the door. Paige rolled her eyes so hard I saw the whites flash on the camera feed. Suddenly, a door across the hallway opened. I saw it on the edge of the camera frame. A sliver of light spilled out into the corridor. My neighbor, Elias, stepped out. Elias was 24, a software engineer who usually wore headphones and avoided eye contact, but the noise had drawn him out. "Is everything okay out here?" Elias asked. His voice was hesitant. I watched the transformation happen in real time. It was terrifying. My mother spun around. In the span of a single second, the scowl vanished from her face. Her posture softened. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest. She looked like a sweet, confused grandmother who had lost her way. "Oh, I am so sorry," she said to Elias. Her voice was syrup and sunshine. "We did not mean to disturb you. We are just trying to reach my daughter. It is a bit of a family issue. She is not answering her phone, and we are just so worried about her mental state." She tapped her temple with her finger. A universal gesture for crazy. Elias looked at them, then at my door. "Do you want me to call someone?" he asked. No, my father said, stepping back and forcing a stiff smile. "We will handle it." "Sorry for the noise." Elias lingered for a moment, sensing that something was wrong, but he was too polite to intervene further. He nodded and retreated into his apartment, closing the door. As soon as the latch clicked on Elias's door, my mother turned back to my door. The smile was gone. The mask had dropped. She did not knock this time. She stepped right up to the camera. I could see the pores on her nose. I could see the spider veins in her eyes. She looked directly into the lens, as if she knew I was watching. Maybe she did. Maybe she could feel my gaze through the digital connection. She leaned in until her mouth was inches from the wood. "Fine," she whispered. Her voice was low, venomous, and clearer than it had been when she was shouting. It was a sound that cut through the door like a razor blade. "You want to play games? We will play games. But you listen to me." She paused. I held my breath. You are not part of this family anymore. She spat the words out. They were not said in anger. They were said with a cold, transactional finality. It was an eviction notice. She was evicting me from the lineage. She was evicting me from the history. She pulled back. "Let us go," she said to the others. "She is a waste of time." I watched them on the screen. My father looked at the door one last time, shook his head in disgust, and turned around. Derek gave the door the finger. Paige was already walking toward the elevator, typing on her phone. My mother smoothed her hair one last time, checked her reflection in the number plate, and followed them. They walked down the hallway. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. They stepped inside. The doors closed. The hallway was empty again. I stood there in the dark entry of my apartment. My hand was still resting on the deadbolt. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing weight of abandonment to buckle my knees. I waited to feel like the little girl who just wanted her mommy to love her, but the tears did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, expanding sensation in my chest. It was like taking a deep breath of cold. Mountain air after being stuck in a smoke-filled room for 30 years. She had said it, finally, for decades. The message had been coded. It had been wrapped in passive-aggressive comments, in forgotten birthdays, in the constant demand for money. It had been hidden behind the phrase, "family helps family," but now, it was out in the open. You are not part of this family anymore. She meant it as a threat. She meant it as the ultimate punishment, to be cast out, to be an orphan. But standing there, safe behind my locked door, with my bank account intact and my dignity unbruised, I did not feel punished. I looked at the empty hallway on my phone screen. I realized that she had not fired me. I had quit, and she had just signed the resignation letter. Finally, I thought, finally, you told the truth. I turned the lock one more time, just to be sure. Then I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. My hands were steady. The apartment was quiet, and for the first time in my life, the silence did not feel lonely. It felt like freedom. Saturday morning arrived with the color of bruised slate. The rain had stopped, but the sky was a heavy, oppressive gray that seemed to press down on the roof of my apartment building. I was awake, fueled by black coffee and the kind of adrenaline that usually comes after a near-miss car accident. I was safe behind my locked door, but I knew the siege was far from over. The physical assault on my privacy had failed, so I knew, with the certainty of a meteorologist predicting a storm, that the atmospheric pressure was about to shift to the public sphere. At 9 o'clock in the morning, my phone lit up. It was not a block number this time. It was Alyssa Vega, my best friend since college and the only person who knew the full, unvarnished history of the Davis family dynamic. Her message was short. "Piper, do not freak out. But you need to check Facebook. Your mom just posted something." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I had not opened Facebook in months, specifically to avoid the curated reality my mother presented to the world, but I knew I had to look. In the world of crisis management, you cannot counter a narrative you have not read. I opened the app. I did not have to scroll far. It was right there at the top of my feed. Posted 45 minutes ago. It was a photo of an old leather-bound photo album, open to a blank page. The lighting was moody. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive storytelling. It is heartbreaking when you realize that the people you sacrificed everything for can turn their backs on you so easily. A mother's love is unconditional, but it seems that in today's world, loyalty has a price tag. We traveled so far to reconnect, only to be shut out in the cold. Literally, pray for our family. We are dealing with some very deep, very painful wounds right now. Family. First heartbroken prayers needed. I stared at the screen. My jaw ached from how hard I was clenching my teeth. She did not name me. That was her brilliance. If she had named me, she would look aggressive, by keeping it vague. She was the victim. She was the martyr. She was the saintly mother weeping over the empty page of her life, while the unnamed villain me laughed in the shadows. I clicked on the comments. They were already rolling in. A woman named Barbara, who I remembered as the gossip queen of my parents' church choir, wrote, "Oh, Marianne, I am so sorry. I can only imagine who you are talking about. Kids these days just do not understand the meaning of sacrifice. Sending you hugs. My Aunt Linda wrote, "Stay strong. Sister, you did everything for those kids. Shame on anyone who forgets where they came from." A random cousin I had not spoken to in 10 years added, "That is terrible. Family is everything. I hope they come to their senses." The anger flared up in my chest. Hot and white, I wanted to type. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to reply to Barbara and tell her that the sacrifice she was praising was actually an attempt to steal $8,000. I wanted to reply to Aunt Linda and tell her that the only thing I had forgotten was to change my banking password sooner. I wanted to post the screenshot of the declined transaction right there in the comments section and watch their digital sympathy evaporate. But I stopped. I took a breath. I pulled my hands away from the phone. That is what she wants. I whispered to the empty room. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to explode. If I started arguing in the comments, if I started throwing accusations, I would look defensive. I would look emotional. I would look exactly like the unstable daughter she was painting me to be. She was baiting a trap, and she was waiting for me to step into it so she could snap the jaws shut and say, "See, I told you she was difficult." I was not going to give her that satisfaction. I was not going to be the crazy daughter. I was going to be the cold, hard wall that she crashed against. I closed Facebook. I did not like the post. I did not comment. I did not share it. Instead, I opened my laptop. I went to the folder I had created the day before, the documentation folder. I took a screenshot of her Facebook post. I took screenshots of the comments. I added them to the file. Then, I opened a new email draft. I addressed it to a lawyer named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was a shark in a silk blouse, a woman I had worked with on a difficult contract negotiation for Copperline 2 years ago. She was expensive, she was terrifying, and she owed me a favor. Subject urgent. Cease and desist. Harassment issue. I typed out the summary. I attached the timeline. I attached the screenshot of the cash advance attempt. I attached the video file of them pounding on my door. I attached the screenshot of the Facebook post. I need a formal cease and desist letter sent immediately. I wrote, I want it sent via certified mail to their address in Plano, and I want a digital copy sent to their email addresses today. The terms are simple: no contact, no physical proximity to my home or workplace, no attempts to access my financial accounts, and no defamatory statements on social media that imply criminal or unethical behavior on my part. I hit send. 20 minutes later, Sarah replied, "Consider it done. I will have the draft to you within the hour. We will serve them electronically by noon." I felt a measure of relief, but I knew the social pressure was just beginning. My mother's Facebook post was a signal flare, and the flying monkeys were mobilizing. At 10:30 in the morning, the text messages started coming in from numbers I did not have saved. One was from an area code in Texas. "Piper, this is Mrs. Gable. I just saw your mother's post. I am praying that you soften your heart. You only have one mother. Do not throw away your family over a misunderstanding." Another one came from a number I vaguely recognized as my Uncle Robert's wife. "We are all very disappointed. Piper, your parents are good people. Call them." They were coming at me from all sides, armed with half-truths and religious guilt. They did not know the facts. They only knew the story Marianne Davis had spun for them, a story where she was the long-suffering saint and I was the cruel, heartless prodigal daughter. I did not reply to Mrs. Gable. I did not reply to my aunt. I tapped the info button. Block caller. I tapped the next one. Block caller. It was a game of whack-a-mole, but I was efficient. I did not read the messages fully. I scanned the first line, identified the tone of moral superiority, and hit the block button. I was not going to let their guilt trip infiltrate my peace. Then, I went back to Alyssa's text thread. I typed, "They are rallying the troops. Random people are texting me to tell me I'm going to hell. Basically," Alyssa replied instantly, "send me their names. I will fight them. I have time today." I smiled. I loved her, but this was not a bar fight. This was a PR campaign. No. I wrote, "Do not engage. That just feeds the fire. But I need to clear the air with the people who actually matter." I thought about who those people were. Most of my extended family were lost causes, firmly entrenched in my mother's cult of personality. But there were a few who had always looked at my parents with a skeptical eye. There was my cousin Ben. who had stopped talking to Derek after a business deal went south. There was my Aunt Sarah, my father's sister, who had always hated the way my mother spoke to waiters. And there was Alyssa. I created a new group chat. It included just 3 people, Alyssa, Ben, and Aunt Sarah. I did not write a long, emotional essay. I did not use adjectives. I used data. I am sending this because there is a public narrative being spun right now that is false. I typed, I am not asking you to take sides, but I am asking you to look at the facts before you judge me. I attached 3 images. Image 1. The screenshot of the banking app showing the declined cash advance of $7,940 at the Plano branch. Image 2. The screenshot of the group chat where my mother wrote, I am handling it right now, followed by the timestamp of the attempted theft. Image 3. A 10-second clip of the video from my door, specifically the moment where my mother's face shifted from the sweet, worried grandmother to the cold, hard mask as she whispered, You are not part of this family anymore. I added one final text. They tried to take my money without asking. I stopped them. When they came to my door to demand it, I refused to let them in. That is the entire story. I am safe, but I am done. I hit send. I watched the read receipts appear. For 5 minutes. There was silence. Then, Aunt Sarah typed, Oh, my God. Cousin Ben typed, That is literally grand larceny. Piper, did you call the police? I replied, Not yet. My lawyer is sending a cease and desist today. I just wanted you guys to know the truth, so you do not have to wonder. Aunt Sarah replied, I just saw her Facebook post. I was about to call her. But now, this makes sense. This makes so much sense. I always knew she was manipulative, but this is criminal. Ben replied, I am screenshotting this. If anyone asks me why Piper is not at Christmas, I am showing them the receipt. Literally, I felt the tension in my shoulders drop another inch. I had secured the perimeter. I had immunized the people I respected against the infection of my mother's lies. As for the rest of them, the Mrs. Gables and the distant cousins, they could believe whatever they wanted. Their opinions did not pay my rent. Around noon, my phone pinged with an email from Sarah Jenkins. Attached is the cease and desist letter. It has been sent. I opened the PDF. It was beautiful. It was written in the sharp, terrifying language of the law. It cited the unauthorized access of credit accounts. It cited the harassment. It explicitly stated that any further attempts to contact me or slander my reputation would result in immediate litigation. It was a shield. I sat back in my chair. The apartment was quiet. The rain outside had started again, a gentle tapping against the glass. I checked Facebook one last time, using an incognito browser so I would not appear as active. The comments on my mother's post had shifted. Aunt Sarah had commented. She did not attack. She just wrote, Interesting perspective. Marianne, does this have anything to do with the bank visit on Thursday? It was a subtle surgical strike. My mother had not replied. In fact, 30 seconds after I refreshed the page, the comment was gone. My mother had deleted it. But then Ben commented, Truth has receipts. Aunt Marianne, careful what you post. That comment disappeared too. Then, the entire post disappeared. She had taken it down. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. But it was genuine. She had realized that the narrative was not as controlled as she thought. She had realized that I was not hiding in a corner. Crying, I was watching, and I had ammunition. She had retreated. I closed the laptop. I walked to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I ate it standing up, looking out at the city. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from a number I did not know, but the preview showed the first few words. You think you are so smart. I did not open it. I did not read the rest. I knew it was Derek or Paige, using a burner app. I blocked the number. I was safe. I was the villain in their story. Yes, but I was a solvent, independent, and protected villain, and frankly, the role suited me much better than the victim. Sunday morning began with a deceptive kind of peace. The rain had paused, leaving Seattle in a suspended state of gray mist that felt almost protective. I sat at my kitchen island with a mug of black coffee, watching the steam rise, feeling a sense of accomplishment. I had weathered the storm. I had blocked the calls. I had secured the perimeter. I thought the war was entering a cold phase, a period of silence where they would retreat to Texas and sulk while I moved on with my life. I was wrong. The silence was not a retreat. It was a reload. At 10:15 in the morning, a notification slid onto the screen of my laptop. It was not a text message or a missed call. It was an email from a travel booking platform I had used years ago, the same platform I had used to book the rental van weeks before. Subject: your reservation at the Azure Coast Resort is confirmed. I froze. I did not blink. I just stared at the bold black text. The Azure Coast Resort was the destination in Florida. It was the place with the swim-up bar and the ocean view suites. It was the place I was explicitly told I was not welcome at. I clicked the email open. Dear Piper, thank you for booking with us. Your oceanfront 2-bedroom suite is reserved for 5 nights. Checking in tomorrow. I scanned the details. The reservation was in my name, Piper Davis. The email address was mine. The phone number was mine. But the guest list included 4 adults: Marianne Davis, Gordon Davis, Derek Davis, Paige Davis. I looked at the payment section. Payment method: Visa, ending in 4492. Status: deposit paid. Remaining balance due at check-in. My stomach dropped. The Visa ending in 4492 was the old card, the one I had canceled on Thursday, the one that was supposed to be a piece of dead plastic. I grabbed my phone and dialed the customer service number for the booking platform immediately. My hands were cold. This was a new level of violation. They were not just trying to take my money. They were wearing my identity like a costume. A representative named Chloe answered after a 2-minute hold. Thank you for calling. This is Chloe. Can I have your reservation number? I gave it to her. My voice was tight, vibrating with suppressed panic. Chloe, I need to understand something. I said, I did not make this reservation. I am looking at a confirmation for a hotel in Florida, but I am in Seattle. How is this booked? Chloe tapped away on her keyboard. Well, Ms. Davis, it looks like it was booked through your online profile about 30 minutes ago. Since you have an account with us from previous trips, your information is saved. The user logged in and selected the upgrade. I closed my eyes. My password. They had guessed my password for the travel site. It was probably something stupid I had set 5 years ago. Something like the name of the street we lived on plus a year. And the payment, I asked. That card was reported lost and stolen on Thursday. How did it process? It looks like the system used the card on file to guarantee the booking. Chloe explained. Since it is a pay-at-property reservation, we only run a pre-authorization check. Sometimes, if the card is recently canceled, the token in our system still registers as valid for a hold until the bank fully rejects the handshake, which can take a few hours, but the card will definitely be declined when you try to pay the full balance of $4,200 at the front desk. I felt a wave of nausea. They knew the card would not work for cash. They knew they could not extract bills from an ATM, so they had pivoted. They had used my account to make the booking, using my credit rating as the collateral. Their plan was to show up at the resort, check in, and when it came time to pay, they would shrug. They would say, "Oh, put it on the room." They would run up a bill of $4,000, plus room service, plus drinks, and when the card was inevitably declined at the end of the stay, the resort would come after the person named on the reservation, me. They were not trying to steal my cash anymore. They were trying to trap me in a debt. They were trying to force me to pay the bill after the fact to save my credit score and avoid a lawsuit from the hotel. Chloe, I said, my voice dropping an octave, this is a fraudulent booking. I need you to cancel it immediately. Okay, Chloe said, sounding unsure. I can cancel it, but because it is within 24 hours of check-in, there is a cancellation fee. The policy states we have to charge the first night's rate plus tax. That comes to $680. I laughed. It was a harsh, incredulous sound. You want to charge me $600 for a reservation I did not make. It is the policy. Ms. Davis, Chloe said. I looked at the clock. If I argued with her, the reservation would stand. If the reservation stood, my family would check in tomorrow. Once they were in the room, getting them out would be a civil matter. The bill would skyrocket. Cancel it, I said. But the fee, Chloe started. Cancel it, I commanded. Charge the fee to the card on file. When it declines, send the bill to my email. I will dispute it later. Just kill the reservation. Right now. I waited. I heard the clicks. It is canceled. Chloe said. I have sent the cancellation notice to your email. Thank you, I said. And Chloe, please wipe my payment methods from the system. Delete the profile. I hung up. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard. $680. That was the cost of the kill switch. They had just burned nearly $700 of my money, or at least, a debt that would now be assigned to me to fight just to try and force a vacation. But the money was not the scary part. The scary part was the access. They had logged into my travel account. They had navigated my profile. They had impersonated me. This was not a family dispute. This was identity theft. I opened a new tab on my browser. I went to the websites for the 3 major credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. I did not hesitate. I initiated a total security freeze on all 3. I filled out the forms. I created pins that were random strings of numbers I generated using a secure app. I watched the progress bars load. Credit report frozen. New inquiries blocked. No one could open a credit card in my name. No one could take out a loan. No one could buy a car. If they tried to use my social security number to open a tab at the resort, the system would flag it instantly. I was building a digital fortress around my existence. My phone on the desk lit up. It was a voicemail notification. The transcription preview said, "New voicemail from unknown caller." I knew who it was. They had found a payphone, or used a hotel lobby phone, or borrowed a stranger's cell. I pressed play. The sound of my mother's voice filled the kitchen, but it was not the sweet voice, and it was not the angry voice. It was a voice I had never heard before. It was breathless, jagged, and terrified. "Piper, you are humiliating us. We are at the airport. The app says the booking is canceled. We have already checked our bags. Do you have any idea what you are doing?" There was a pause. I could hear airport announcements in the background. I could hear my father shouting something unintelligible. Then her voice dropped. It became a low, guttural whisper. "You think you can just cut us off? You think you are the only one with power? We raised you. We know everything about you. We have your social security number. We have your birth certificate. We know where you bank. We still have your information." She emphasized the word information like it was a weapon. "Don't make this worse. Piper, fix the booking, or we will start using what we know." The message ended. I sat there, frozen. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin. "We still have your information." It was a threat. A direct, unequivocal threat. She was telling me that if I did not pay for their vacation, she would use my identity to destroy me. She would open accounts. She would ruin my credit. She would bleed me dry using the data she possessed simply because she had given birth to me. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from a profound, sickening realization. I had been treating this like a boundary issue. I had been treating this like a toxic family dynamic that could be managed with blocked numbers and therapy. But this was a crime. I saved the voicemail. I exported the audio file. I sent it directly to Sarah Jenkins, my lawyer. I typed a message to Sarah. "They just threatened to use my personal data to commit financial fraud if I do not comply. Listen to the audio. This is extortion." Then, I went to work. I did not cry. I did not panic. I went into survival mode. I logged into my primary email account, the one I had used since college, the one my family knew. I set up a forwarding rule to a brand new, encrypted email address I created right then and there. Then, I went through every critical service: my bank, my retirement fund, my health insurance, my company payroll portal, and changed the contact email to the new one. I changed every password. I used a random generator for everything. 64 characters of gibberish. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything that offered it, linking it to an authenticator app on my phone, not my phone number. I knew they could try to SIM swap me if they were smart enough, or if Derek knew a guy. I cut that line off too. I worked for 3 hours straight. I scrubbed my digital footprint. I removed my address from people search websites. I alerted my building management that my identity was compromised. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was exhausted. My eyes burned. My fingers ached, but I was secure. I stood up and walked to the window. The city below was moving on, oblivious to the fact that I had just fought a war from my kitchen counter. I thought about my mother standing in the airport. I thought about the cancellation fee. I thought about the threat. "We have your information." She was right. They had my history. They had my past. They knew the name of my first pet and the street I grew up on. But they did not have my future. I realized then that the bridge was not just burned. I had nuked the canyon. There was no going back to Thanksgiving dinners. There was no going back to awkward Christmas mornings. You do not reconcile with people who threaten to steal your identity. You prosecute them. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Sarah Jenkins. I heard the voicemail. "This is actionable. I am drafting a criminal referral as a contingency. Do not engage. You are doing everything right." I put the phone down. I was alone in my apartment. The silence was absolute. But for the first time, the silence did not feel like an absence of noise. It felt like a shield. I walked to the fridge and opened a bottle of sparkling water. The sharp hiss of the carbonation escaping sounded like a celebration. I took a sip. It tasted like cold, clean resolve. "You wanted a vacation," I thought, looking at the gray sky. "Well, you just got a permanent one. From my life. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up without a deficit. I do not mean a financial deficit, though that was certainly true as well. I mean an energetic deficit. For 33 years, I had started every morning with a negative balance, my emotional reserves already overdrawn by the anticipation of my family's needs. I used to wake up wondering who was going to call, who needed money, whose crisis I would have to manage before I had even brushed my teeth. But now, the silence in my apartment was not empty. It was full. It was full of time. It was full of possibilities. The week following the airport threat was a revelation. When you stop pouring your energy into a black hole, you are amazed at how much you have left for yourself. At Copperline Creative Systems, the difference was immediate. I was no longer the project manager who was efficient but exhausted. I was sharp. I was dangerous. On Tuesday, I walked into a strategy meeting for a new client, a massive sustainable energy firm that had been giving us headaches for months. Usually, I would sit in the back, taking notes and putting out fires. This time, I stood up, I walked to the whiteboard, I dismantled their current branding strategy in 10 minutes and proposed a new architecture that was cleaner, smarter, and under budget. When I finished, the room was quiet. My boss, a woman named Elena, who rarely handed out compliments, looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "Piper," she said, "where have you been hiding that?" I smiled. It was not the Copperline face. It was just me. "I have been distracted." I said, "I am not distracted anymore." By Friday, Elena had put me in charge of the entire account. It came with a title bump and a salary increase of 12%. I signed the paperwork without calling my mother to tell her. I did not need her validation. I did not need her to ask me for a loan to celebrate. I just signed it, bought myself a bottle of good Pinot Noir, and went home. But I knew that work was not enough. If I just worked, I would become a robot. I needed to reclaim the parts of myself that had atrophied. So, I signed up for a cooking class. It was a pasta-making workshop in a converted loft in Capitol Hill. It was the kind of thing Paige would have mocked as pretentious, and Derek would have called a waste of money because you can buy pasta for $2. I walked in on Saturday evening, feeling strangely nervous. I was wearing an apron. My hands were covered in flour, and I was trying to knead a ball of dough that refused to cooperate. "Need a hand with that," I looked up. Standing at the station next to me was a man. He was about my age, maybe a little older. He had dark hair, laugh lines around his eyes, and a smear of flour on his cheek. He was not devastatingly handsome like a movie star. He was just normal. He looked kind. "I am Piper," I said, "and yes, I think my dough hates me." "I am Miles," he said. He reached over and showed me how to use the heel of my hand. "You have to be firm with it. It senses fear." We laughed. It was a small moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe, but for me, it was seismic. We talked for the next 2 hours. We talked about the rain in Seattle. We talked about the best pizza places in the city. He did not ask me what I did for a living immediately. He did not ask me if I had connections. He did not ask me for anything. He was just a man making ravioli, enjoying the evening. At the end of the class, while we were packing up our containers of misshapen pasta, Miles looked at me. "I am going to grab a coffee next door," he said. "Would you like to join me?" "No pressure." I hesitated. The old piper would have said no. The old piper would have checked her phone to see if Mom was having a meltdown. The old piper would have felt guilty for enjoying herself while her family was miserable. I looked at my phone. It was silent. I would love that. I said. We sat in the coffee shop for an hour. Miles Carter was an architect. He designed libraries. He spoke about light and space with a quiet passion that was soothing. He was steady. He was the antithesis of the chaos I had been raised in. For the first time in years, I felt like a person, not a function. And then, the vibration happened. It was not a text. It was a security alert. I felt it buzz against my thigh. I ignored it for a minute, not wanting to break the spell of the conversation. But then it buzzed again, and again. I am so sorry. I told Miles, I have to check this. I pulled my phone out. The screen was bright with a notification from my digital wallet app, a secondary service I rarely used, mostly for storing airline miles and hotel points. New sign-in detected. Device iPad Air. 3rd Gen, location Plano, Texas. My blood ran cold. The warmth of the coffee shop evaporated instantly. I stared at the device name. iPad Air. I remembered. 3 years ago, I had upgraded my tablet. I had given my old one to my mother so she could play word games and video call the grandkids. I had wiped it, or so I thought, but clearly, I had not wiped it well enough, or perhaps I had logged in during a visit to show her photos and check the Remember This Device box. They were not in my bank account. I had secured that with a fortress of new passwords, but they were inside my rewards ecosystem. They were looking at my accumulated points. 200,000 airline miles, 5 nights of hotel credits. They were scavenging. They had realized they could not get the cash, so now they were trying to liquidate my assets. They were trying to transfer the miles. They were trying to book something, anything, using the digital currency I had earned. I looked at Miles. He was watching me with concern. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "You look like you just saw a ghost." I did. I said, I stood up. "I have to handle this. I am really sorry." "Miles." He nodded, sensing the shift in my energy. "Go. Do what you need to do." I walked out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and locked the doors. I did not drive away. I opened the app. I could see the activity in real time. They were currently on the transfer points screen. They were trying to move 100,000 miles to an account named Derek Davis. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was not fear anymore. It was the thrill of the hunt. I did not just block the transaction. I went nuclear. I tapped the security tab. I selected sign out of all devices. I watched the spinning wheel. Done. But I knew that was not enough. If they knew the password, they would just log back in. They likely had the password written down in that little notebook my mother kept by the landline. I hit change password. I typed in a new string of characters that was 30 digits long, a chaotic mix of symbols and numbers that I would have to memorize later. Then, I went to the security questions. This was their back door. This was how they had likely bypassed the two-factor authentication if the iPad was a trusted device. Current question, what is the name of your first pet? Answer Buster. They knew that. Of course they knew that. Buster was the golden retriever we had when I was 7. I deleted it. I selected a new question. Question, where did you meet your spouse? I was not married. They knew that. They mocked me for it constantly. Answer, the surface of Mars. I selected another question. Question, what is your mother's middle name? Answer, purple dinosaur. I changed every single answer to a piece of nonsense that existed only in my brain. I decoupled the logic from the reality, to hack me now. They would not need to know my history. They would need to be telepathic. Finally, I went to the family sharing settings on my main Apple ID, something I had forgotten to check in the initial purge. There they were, Derek, Paige, Mom, Dad, all listed under family. They were sharing my cloud storage. They were sharing my app purchases. They were leeching off my digital subscription services. I clicked remove on Derek. I clicked remove on page. I clicked remove on mom. I clicked remove on dad. I watched their names disappear one by one. The moment the last name vanished, my phone lit up with a text message. It was from a new number, but the voice was unmistakable. Derek, you think you can just shut us out? We are watching the screen. You just kicked us off. That is theft. Piper, those points belong to the family. I stared at the word theft. The irony was so dense it could collapse a star. I took a screenshot. I added it to the documentation folder. Then Paige sent a text. It was a wall of text, a solid block of gray bubbles. Paige, you ruined my life. Do you know how embarrassed Mom is? We are the laughing stock of the church. I had to pay for my own flight home. I maxed out my credit card because of you. You are a monster. I hope you die alone with your money. I read the words, monster. Die alone. I felt a strange pang of pity. Not for myself, but for them. They were so small. They were so trapped in their own narrative of entitlement that they genuinely believed I was the aggressor for closing the vault. I did not reply. I remembered Sarah Jenkins' advice. Silence is not just a boundary. It is evidence. Every time you do not reply, you prove that you are the rational party de-escalating the conflict. Let them scream. We are printing the transcripts. I saved Paige's text. I blocked the new numbers. I sat in the dark car, listening to the rain drum against the roof. The attack had been thwarted. My miles were safe. My cloud storage was mine alone. But I realized something. I could not stay in Seattle next week. Next week was the week of the vacation I was supposed to pay for, the vacation I was excluded from. If I stayed here, I would be looking over my shoulder. I would be waiting for them to show up at my office. I would be checking the camera feed every 5 minutes. I needed to be physically gone. I needed to be somewhere they could not find me. Somewhere the cell service was spotty and the air was clean. I opened my travel app, the one they had tried to hijack. I searched for Whidbey Island. It was only a few hours away. A ferry ride across the Sound. But it felt like a different world. I found a cabin. It was small. It was perched on a bluff overlooking the water. It had a wood-burning stove and no television. The dates. The exact same dates as their Florida trip. I booked it. I paid with my new card. I did not post about it on social media. I did not tell anyone, not even Alyssa. I closed the phone. I thought about Miles Carter and his flower-covered hands. I thought about the way he listened. I thought about the surface of Mars. I started the car. I was not running away. I was running toward something. I was running toward a week where the only voice I would hear would be the wind in the trees and the thoughts in my own head. I drove home, the city lights blurring past me. Let them text. Let them try to guess the name of a purple dinosaur. I was going to an island, and for the first time, the isolation would be a luxury, not a punishment. The week I spent on Whidbey Island was a study in contrasts. While I sat by a wood-burning stove, reading paperback novels and listening to the wind howl off the Puget Sound, I knew that 2,000 miles away in Plano, Texas, a very different kind of storm was raging. My family was not in Florida. The cancellation email I had triggered had ensured that they were grounded. They were likely out the cost of their non-refundable flights, and they were definitely out the deposit on the rental van. In the vacuum of that lost vacation, they turned on each other. I did not need a spy camera to know this. I knew the ecosystem of the Davis family. When the resource me was removed, the predators had nothing to eat but themselves. I returned to Seattle on a Tuesday, feeling mentally scrubbed clean. But the digital world was waiting for me. The first crack in their wall came in the form of an email from my father. It arrived in my old inbox, the one I checked only once a day now, like checking a trap for vermin. Subject, thinking of you. I opened it. Piper, I know things got heated. Dad should have stopped the joke at dinner before it went too far. I am sorry your feelings were hurt. We are all just under a lot of stress with the lost money from the trip. Your mother is really struggling. Please, just call us so we can work this out. We are a family. I read the email twice. I dissected it like a biological specimen. Dad should have stopped the joke. He was using the third person, distancing himself from his own inaction, and he was still calling it a joke. He was minimizing the cruelty of vacation without you, into a mere slip of the tongue rather than a statement of intent. And then we are under a lot of stress with the lost money. There it was, the hook. He was not writing to apologize for the humiliation or the attempted theft. He was writing because the financial consequences were starting to bite. He wanted me to call so he could pivot the conversation to a loan. He wanted to smooth things over just enough to get the credit card number back. I did not reply. I realized that an apology offered only to alleviate the offender's discomfort is not an apology, it is a manipulation. If I answered, I would be validating his premise that this was a two-sided conflict. It was not. It was a crime and a victim. I moved the email to a folder named Attempts. 2 days later, the real blow landed. I was at my apartment, preparing for a video conference with the sustainable energy client, when my buzzer rang. It was the concierge. Mr. Henderson, Ms. Davis, he said, his voice professional but wary. There is a process server here for you. My heart skipped a beat. A process server. Send him up, I said. A man in a cheap windbreaker handed me a thick envelope, muttered, "Have a nice day," and left. I stood in my entryway and tore open the seal. Inside was a stack of paperwork. I scanned the cover sheet. Superior Court of Washington, Small Claims Division, Plaintiff Marianne Davis, Defendant Piper Davis. I blinked. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My mother was suing me. I flipped to the statement of claim. Her handwriting was jagged. Pressed hard into the paper. Claim the defendant, Piper Davis, entered into a verbal contract to fund a family vacation. Relying on this promise, the plaintiff incurred expenses for flights and deposits. The defendant then maliciously canceled the booking and blocked access to agreed-upon funds, causing financial damages of $4,500. The plaintiff seeks reimbursement for these losses plus emotional distress. I burst out laughing. It was a sharp, incredulous sound that bounced off the walls of my empty apartment. It was the laughter of someone witnessing the absolute limit of human delusion. She was suing me for the money she failed to steal. She was dragging me into a court of law to argue that because I had been a doormat for 10 years, I was legally obligated to remain a doormat forever. She was claiming that my credit limit was a verbal contract, but as the laughter faded, a cold realization set in. This was not just about the money. This was about the stage. My mother was an actress without an audience. She had lost the audience of Facebook when she deleted her post. She had lost the audience of the family when the vacation fell apart. Now, she wanted a judge to be her audience. She wanted to stand in a room and point a finger at me and tell a story where she was the victim of a cruel, rich, heartless daughter. She wanted to legally compel me to look at her. I walked to my desk and picked up my phone. I dialed Sarah Jenkins. "Sarah," I said, "you are not going to believe this." I read her the claim. On the other end of the line, Sarah was silent for a moment. Then she let out a low whistle. "This is a nuisance suit." "Piper," Sarah said, "it is frivolous. In small claims court, you cannot sue for emotional distress, and a verbal promise to give a gift is generally not an enforceable contract. She has no case, but she filed it." I said, "Yes," Sarah said, "because filing fee is cheap and she is desperate. She thinks you will settle. She thinks you will be so terrified of a public court record that you will write a check for $5,000 just to make it go away. It is a shakedown." I looked at the paperwork in my hand. I looked at my mother's signature at the bottom, the looped, decorative script she used for Christmas cards. "I am not settling." I said, "Good," Sarah said, "then we prepare." And Piper. We do not just defend, we destroy the premise over the next 48 hours. I became a historian of my own abuse. Sarah guided me through the preparation. We needed to build a timeline that was unimpeachable. I printed the bank records. I highlighted the date and time of the Thanksgiving dinner. I printed the screenshot of the group chat. The crucial exchange. Me. I cannot wait for our vacation. Mom. Vacation is for family. Without you. That was Exhibit A. That was the proof that there was no contract. She had explicitly excluded me. You cannot have a contract with someone you have kicked out of the deal. Then, Exhibit B, the notification. Pending cash advance. $7,940. The location, Plano. Texas. The The status declined. Then, Exhibit C, the text message from Mom. I am handling it right now. The timestamp matched the bank attempt perfectly. And finally, the video file, the footage from my doorbell camera. The moment she whispered, "You are not part of this family anymore." I organized everything into a binder. I used color-coded tabs. I was treating this like a project for Copperline. My mother was the problem client, and the judge was the stakeholder I needed to win over. On Friday night, Alyssa came over. She brought a bottle of wine and a look of sheer disbelief. "I cannot believe she actually did it," Alyssa said, reading the court summons. "This is psychopathic behavior. Piper, she is willing to go on public record with this." "She thinks she is right," I said, sipping my wine. "That is the scary part. She has rewritten reality in her head. In her version, that money is hers. I am just the vault keeper who went rogue." Alyssa checked her phone. "Speaking of reality," she said, "my cousin just sent me something. Apparently, your mom is telling people at the church that you are going to settle before the court date." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" Alyssa nodded. She read from her phone. "Marianne says Piper knows she's in the wrong. She says Piper's name was on the reservation, so legally, she is on the hook. She says she is just teaching you a lesson about responsibility." I felt a flash of heat, but I tamped it down. Responsibility. I repeated. That was their entire strategy. They were banking on my shame. They thought that the Piper who used to apologize for existing would resurface the moment a judge looked at her. They thought I would crumble under the weight of family duty. I stood up and walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at myself. I was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, but I looked different than I had a month ago. My shoulders were lower. My jaw was set. I am not settling. I told Alyssa's reflection in the glass, and I am not teaching her a lesson. I am handing her a receipt. I practiced what I would say. I knew that in small claims court, you do not get a lawyer. You have to speak for yourself. You have to stand there, 5 feet away from the person suing you, and tell your truth. I looked into my own eyes in the mirror. I practiced the opening line. "Your Honor, there was no contract. There was an attempted theft. No, that was too aggressive." I tried again. "Your Honor, the plaintiff explicitly stated I was excluded from this trip. I have the transcripts. Better, clinical, detached." I thought about the phrase my mother had used in the voicemail. "We have your information." I thought about the years of, "Can you just cover this, and we will pay you back." I took a deep breath. Access is earned. I whispered to the mirror. It became my mantra. Access is earned. Access to my money. Access to my time. Access to my love. They had earned nothing. They had spent my capital and then sued me for closing the bank. The court date was set for the following Monday. It was a mandatory mediation session first, followed by a hearing if we could not agree. I knew we would not agree. I spent the weekend alone. I did not go to the cooking class. I did not text Miles. I needed to be sharp. I reviewed my binder until I had memorized every timestamp. Sunday night, I laid out my clothes for court: a navy blue blazer, a crisp white shirt, tailored trousers. It was my armor. It was the uniform of a woman who manages millions of dollars in corporate assets. A woman who does not get pushed around by people who think ocean view is a human right. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I knew they were in Seattle by now. They had likely flown in using whatever credit cards they had left, convinced that the settlement check I would write them tomorrow would cover the debt. They were expecting a nervous, guilty daughter. They were expecting the version of me that they had created. They were in for a shock. I closed my eyes and let myself sleep. I needed the rest, because tomorrow, I was not just going to court, I was going to a funeral. I was going to bury the last lingering hope that my family could be saved, and I was going to walk away from the grave without looking back. The waiting room of the King County District Court was a study in beige. The walls were beige, the floors were speckled beige linoleum, and the plastic chairs were a shade of beige that suggested they had given up on life sometime in the late 90s. I sat in the corner, my back to the wall, wearing my navy blazer and checking the battery on my iPad. I was calm. It was a terrifying, unnatural kind of calm, the way the eye of a hurricane is calm while it destroys everything around it. At 8:55 in the morning, the elevator doors opened, and the Davis family production arrived. My mother, Marianne, led the way. She was dressed for the role of the grieving, confused matriarch. She wore a soft, pastel cardigan that looked slightly too big for her, making her appear frail. She was clutching a tissue in her hand, even though her eyes were dry. My father, Gordon, walked a step behind her, looking at the floor, his shoulders hunched in his heavy coat. Derek and Paige trailed in the back. Derek looked hungover and irritable, wearing a suit jacket over a t-shirt. Paige was wearing large sunglasses indoors and typing furiously on her phone. They saw me. My mother stopped. She took a breath, preparing to launch into a greeting. Perhaps a hug, perhaps a scene. But I did not stand up. I did not smile. I looked at her the way a bank teller looks at a customer who has just failed a security check. I nodded once, acknowledging their presence, and then returned my gaze to my iPad. She faltered. The script she had written in her head clearly started with me looking guilty. When I did not play along, she looked at my father, confused. He just shrugged. A clerk opened the door to the mediation room. Davis versus Davis. She called out. We filed in. The room was small, dominated by a long, oval table. At the head sat the mediator, a woman named Ms. Kincaid. She looked tired, but sharp, with glasses perched on the end of her nose and a file thick with paperwork in front of her. My mother took the seat directly across from me. She arranged her tissue on the table. She sighed loud enough for the microphone in the ceiling to pick up. Ms. Kincaid cleared her throat. We are here regarding the claim filed by Marianne Davis against Piper Davis for breach of contract and financial damages related to a family vacation. She said, Ms. Davis, since you are the plaintiff, you may begin. My mother straightened up. She looked at Ms. Kincaid with wide, watery eyes. Thank you, Your Honor, she began. Even though Ms. Kincaid was a mediator, not a judge, I am just heartbroken to be here. We are a close family. We have always helped each other. She paused for effect. We planned this trip to Florida for months. It was supposed to be a reunion. Piper, my daughter. She insisted on handling the finances. She promised us she would take care of it. We relied on that promise. We booked our flights. We packed our bags. And then, at the last minute, out of spite, she canceled everything. She locked us out of the funds we had set aside. She left us stranded. I am asking for $4,500 to cover the losses we incurred because of her cruelty. She sniffled. She dabbed at her eye with the dry tissue. She is punishing the family, my mother added, her voice trembling. She is using money to control us. Derek nodded vigorously. Paige let out a loud sigh of agreement. My father just stared at his hands. Ms. Kincaid made a note on her pad. She turned to me. Ms. Davis, your response. I stood up. I did not tremble. I did not look at my mother. I looked directly at the mediator. There was no contract. I said, my voice was even, and there was no promise. I was explicitly excluded from this vacation. The plaintiff is suing me because I refused to allow her to steal from me. Objection, Derek shouted. That is a lie. Ms. Kincaid held up a hand. Mr. Davis? Silence. Go on. Piper? I opened my folder. I would like to submit Exhibit A, I said, sliding a printed screenshot across the table. This is a transcript of the family group chat from Thanksgiving Day. As you can see, at 6:32 in the evening, I expressed excitement for the trip. At 6:33, the plaintiff, Marianne Davis, replied, vacation is for family. Without you. Ms. Kincaid picked up the paper. She read it. She looked over her glasses at my mother. My mother flushed. It was just a joke. She muttered, she knows our sense of humor. I continued. Following this exclusion, I returned to Seattle. I did not agree to fund the trip. However, on the following Thursday, an attempt was made to access my credit line. I slid the second paper across. Exhibit B. This is a bank record from Onyx Rewards. It shows a card-present attempt to withdraw $7,940 as a cash advance. The location is the Plano branch, 5 minutes from the plaintiff's home, Ms. Kincaid looked at the number. $7,940, she repeated. That is significantly more than the cost of a rental van deposit. I moved to the next document, Exhibit C, a screenshot of the group chat from the exact same time as the bank transaction. The plaintiff writes, "I am handling it right now," followed by a smiling emoji. My mother shifted in her seat. She was gripping her purse tightly. I did not stop. When I declined this unauthorized transaction, the family flew to Seattle to confront me at my home. I pulled out my iPad. I had authorized the connection to the room's display screen. Exhibit D. I said. I pressed play. The video from my doorbell camera filled the screen on the wall. The sound of banging echoed in the small room. My father's voice shouting, "Stop," acting like a child. And then, the camera angle shifted. My mother's face appeared, distorted by the lens but unmistakable. The room went dead silent as her whisper played through the speakers. "Fine, you are not part of this family anymore." I paused the video on her face. The sneer was frozen in high definition. I looked at the mediator. The plaintiff claims I am punishing the family by withholding funds for a vacation she stated I was not part of. But the evidence shows that she formally disowned me on my doorstep when she could not access my money. My mother was pale now. The act was crumbling. But I had one last thing, the nuclear option. Finally, I said, "I would like to play a voicemail I received 3 days ago." This was after I canceled the fraudulent hotel booking made in my name without my consent. I pressed play again. My mother's voice, breathless and frantic, filled the room. "We still have your information. Do not make this worse." The recording ended. I placed the transcript of the voicemail on the table next to the cease and desist letter my lawyer had sent. "This is a threat of identity theft," I said. "The plaintiff is not here because of a broken contract. She is here because she believes she owns my identity." Ms. Kincaid set her pen down. The sound was like a gavel striking. She turned to my mother. Her face was no longer neutral. It was stern. "Mrs. Davis," she said, "did you attempt to withdraw $8,000 from your daughter's account without her specific authorization on that day?" My mother looked around the room. She looked at Derek, who was looking at the ceiling. She looked at Dad, who was still looking at his shoes. She had no audience left. I was just moving it for safekeeping." She stammered. I thought, with her being so emotional, I should secure the funds for the family so she did not spend it foolishly. "Safekeepings," Kincaid repeated. "You tried to cash advance a credit card for safekeeping, and then you threatened to use her personal information when the booking was canceled. It was not a threat," my mother cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "I am her mother. I have a right to make sure she does right by her family. She is selfish. She has plenty of money and she leaves us with nothing, Ms. Kincaid held up her hand. "Stop." She looked at the paperwork for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "Ms. Davis, your evidence is overwhelming." She turned back to my mother. "Claim denied," she said firmly. "There is absolutely no evidence of a contract. In fact, the evidence suggests a pattern of financial abuse and harassment." My mother gasped. "Abuse, Ms." Kincaid leaned forward. "Mrs. Davis, I am going to be very clear. This hearing is over. You are not getting a dime. Furthermore, based on the voicemail I just heard, I am putting a note in this file. If you attempt to use your daughter's personal information to open accounts, access credit, or interfere with her finances in any way, you will be looking at criminal charges for identity theft and fraud. Do you understand me?" My mother did not answer. She just sat there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Do you understand me?" "Ms." Kincaid repeated. Louder. "Yes," my father whispered. "We understand." Dismissed. "Ms." Kincaid said. I packed up my iPad. I closed my binder. I stood up and walked out of the room without looking back. I walked down the long hallway toward the exit. The air outside the room felt lighter, cleaner. I heard footsteps behind me. "Piper, wait," it was my father. I stopped near the security checkpoint. I turned around. The 4 of them were standing there. My mother looked defeated, her cardigan sagging. Derek looked furious. Paige looked bored. My father looked tired. "Piper," my father said, coming closer. "Look, that went poorly. But we are still here. We are in Seattle. Maybe we can just go get some lunch. Talk this out. We can put this behind us." My mother looked up, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Yes, she said, her voice wobbling. Let us just start over. Piper, we forgive you for the court thing. Just come to lunch. I looked at them. I really looked at them. They were waiting for the reset button. They thought that because the judge had said no to the money, we simply reverted to the default setting where I paid for lunch, and we pretended nothing happened. They thought the bond of blood was a suicide pact I was forced to honor. I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder. I am not coming to lunch. I said, Piper, please. My father said, do not be like this. You won. Is that not enough? I shook my head. I did not win. I said, I just stopped losing. I looked at my mother. You said vacation was without me. I said, my voice was soft, but it carried in the echoey hall. I took a step back. You wanted vacation without me. Now, you get life without my access. I turned around and walked through the revolving doors. Piper, my mother screamed. Piper, get back here. I did not stop. I did not flinch. I walked out into the cool, gray morning of Seattle. I walked 3 blocks to the ferry terminal. I bought a ticket to Whidbey Island. An hour later, I was standing on the deck of the ferry. The wind was whipping my hair across my face. The city skyline was receding behind me, shrinking until the Space Needle looked like a toy. I held a paper cup of coffee in my hands. It was warm. I looked down at the dark, churning water of the Puget Sound. I thought I would feel sad. I thought I would feel the phantom limb of my family, the ache of the amputation. But as I watched the wake of the boat cutting through the water, creating a foaming white line of separation between where I was and where I had been, I realized something. I had not lost a family. I had lost a job. I had been fired from the position of the wallet, and I had quit the position of the doormat. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and strong. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the contacts. I scrolled to Mom. Delete contact. I scrolled to Dad. Delete contact. I put the phone away. The ferry horn blasted, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in my chest. I took a deep breath of the salty air. I was alone on the deck. I was alone in the world. And for the first time in 33 years, the view was spectacular. Thank you so much for listening to Piper's story. I know family drama can be heavy, but sometimes setting a boundary is the only way to find yourself. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below, so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who might need a little inspiration to stand up for themselves. See you in the next story.